I was just thinking, 71 years ago, a young man at the age of 24 was kneeling beside a muddy pond praying. Perhaps he'd even been praying all night long. Now, towards the east, it was the dawning of a new day.
That young man's name was William Marion Branham, and as a new day was dawning that morning in 1933, so was a new day dawning for all of God's people, for God had sent his messenger among us. Just as Jesus came and walked with his followers along the shores of the Galilee 2,000 years ago, we too have walked with God in our day. He equipped a man, a human vessel, with a gift that would demonstrate the presence of Jesus Christ among us, just as he promised in the book of Malachi.
William Branham lived such a life of simplicity, mainly here in this little river city of Jeffersonville, Indiana. He built and pastored a humble little tabernacle, while ignoring fame and fortune which could have easily have been his with the unique ministry that God had given to him. But his sole purpose in life was to preach and live the word of Jesus Christ before his generation.
My name is Joseph Branham, and this is my brother Billy Paul Branham. Today we would like to invite you to come with us as we tour the city that has seen the footsteps of this prophet, a place where God marched again in human flesh across the face of this generation in a man named William Branham. My father was born in the hills of southern Kentucky, just about 12 miles from the Tennessee state line. When he was only 3 years old, one day as he was playing outside with his brother, he heard a voice speak to him saying, "You will live near a city called New Albany." The following year, he and his family left Kentucky and moved north to Jeffersonville, Indiana, just 3 miles east of New Albany. Both cities are located on the north bank of the Ohio River, and between them is a landmark that is known as the Falls of the Ohio. In very ancient times, the shallow rapids of the falls was a crossing spot for migrating herds as they journeyed to the salt licks in Kentucky. But when our nation was young, the falls posed a serious navigational barrier for the explorers and settlers who wanted to follow the Ohio River westward, and eventually this place became a natural stopping point for travelers. Today, Jeffersonville, which is located on a peninsula of land that juts into the path of the river just above the falls, has once again become a stopping point for travelers from around the world. They come to do what we are going to be doing today, visiting some of the places in and around this river community that has seen the footsteps of God's prophet.
As a child, one of my dad's favorite treats was to be able to make an occasional visit to this local candy store here in downtown Jeffersonville, where for just 2 cents he would buy a bag of Mr. Schimpf's delicious cinnamon Red Hots. Today, the Schimpf family is still making these Red Hots, using the same recipe and even some of the same big copper kettles that were used some 90 years ago.
Is there anything else I can get for you?
Believers from all over the world visit this little candy shop that Dad spoke of with such fondness, And like us, they can't resist taking home a package of these Red Hots that have now become world famous. If I were asked to name some of the most notable milestones of William Branham's life, I believe the phenomenal event that took place at this very spot here would certainly top the list. It was on the 11th of June in 1933, and Dad was conducting a baptismal service here in the Ohio River at the end of Spring Street. He had just preached a 2 weeks revival, and the people being baptized were the converts from those services, including Dad's 73-year-old grandfather, Francis Marion Harvey. My mother, Sister Hope, was snapping photos with her brand new Kodak Brownie camera. And as the 17th candidate for baptism walked out to where Dad was standing, in about 3 foot of water, suddenly a light that looked like a star appeared and hung over the place where he was baptizing. In an area of about 15 feet square, it suddenly began to churn, and a voice spoke, saying, "As John the Baptist was sent to forerun the first coming of Christ, you will forerun his second coming." In December of 1936, my mother, Sister Hope, fainted as she stood waiting for a bus that would take her to town to shop for Christmas presents. That night, here in this house, as Dad prayed, he saw a black sheet come down before him. Then he saw a flood rise in the streets of Jeffersonville, and an angel measured 22 feet of water at the corner of Spring and Court. 6 weeks later, what became known as the superflood of 1937 covered the entire Ohio Valley. The water was above flood stage in Jeffersonville for some 23 days. And just as the vision had shown, at the corner of Spring and Court Avenue, it measured 22 feet deep. Mother was hospitalized with pneumonia, and Dad had spent every day in his small boat assisting the rescue teams that patrolled the flooded areas, looking for survivors and bringing them to safety. During one particular terrifying rescue, his motor on his boat failed, and quickly he was caught in dangerous currents that rushed him towards the Ohio Falls. Calling out to God for mercy, he thought about the opportunity that he had had to evangelize and that he had rejected. He then cried out, "Lord, if you'll forgive me, I'll do anything that you want me to do." When he tried again to start the motor, this time it started immediately, and he was able to make his way safely to the shore. Mother's long bout with pneumonia severely had weakened her lungs, and within a few months, tuberculosis had invaded her body. She died at 11:10 p.m. on Wednesday, July the 21st, at the Clark County Memorial Hospital. She was just 24 years old. Her funeral was on that Saturday, July the 24th. On that same day, my sister Sharon Rose suddenly went into spasms and was hospitalized. Dad hurried to the hospital following Mother's funeral, But as he prayed for his baby Sharon, once again a black sheet seemed to fall upon his eyes. And on Monday, July the 26th, just 5 days after Mother's death, Sharon Rose died of tubercular meningitis. The next day, the grave was opened, and Sharon Rose's casket was placed on top of Mother's. She would have been 9 months old on that day.
On October 23, 1941, William Branham and Meta Marie Broy were married. Their home was across the street from the Branham Tabernacle. Nearly every person in the congregation was poor and barely able to make ends meet, so Daddy continued to work for the Public Service Company of Indiana to support the family. Often he would walk 30 miles a day as he patrolled the lines looking for broken insulators. One afternoon in the spring of 1946, a whirlwind tossed Daddy against the side of this house. He told Mother that he must know once and for all what these strange occurrences were all about, and that he was going to the wilderness. As he headed for Green's Mill, where he often went to pray, he told her, "I will not come home until I hear from God." He spent the night in a tiny cabin that was located in the same area as the well-hidden cave that he had found as a boy when he trapped and fished in this wilderness area to help feed his family. As Daddy cried out to God, it was about 11 o'clock that night when an angel appeared in the room.
Shining through a knothole, a lantern or something was way in the wilderness. And I thought somebody's coming up. The light was on the floor, spread greater and greater. I heard of somebody walking. When it did, it was a man. He was barefooted. He had hair to his shoulders. He had on a robe. And I scared me to death. He said, "Don't fear. I'm sent from the presence of the Lord God to tell you it's your peculiar life. Don't try to get from these things. That is your calling. God will be sending you to different places all over the world to pray for the sick. And if you get the people to believe and be sincere, nothing will stand before the prayer."
Thousands of people made their way to this house on Ewing Lane, seeking prayer and a chance to draw on the gift that God had given his servant.
With the beautiful stone accents and the deep green shutters that stood out against the white siding, the 1,300 square foot home looked like a palace to Mom and Dad. We moved in on their 7th anniversary, October the 23rd, 1948.
It was through this curved stone entrance that the Mother Possum came in 1955. She limped up the driveway, which is not paved at the time, and laid down near the front of the house, waiting to be prayed for. I have lived here with my family since Mother went to be with the Lord in 1981. In September of 1933, a lot was purchased here at the corner of 8th and Penn Street, where the road made a jog to go around a shallow pond. It was a pretty spot where lilies would sometimes push their way up through the mud and turn the area into a garden. Daddy liked to come here to pray, and when the time came, it was the place that God told him to build his church. The church was initially called the Pentecostal Tabernacle, but later it became known as the Branham Tabernacle. It has been remodeled several times, and a major expansion was completed in 1963, adding 150 seats to the sanctuary. But the same bell that rang out on that Sunday morning 71 years ago, calling the believers to service, is still being faithfully rung today. On August 29, 1965, Daddy preached in the tabernacle for the last time. His message was titled Satan's Eden. Just before the closing song and prayer, he spoke these words.
That's all I know to tell you, that this Bible I believe with all my heart, if I know my heart, to be the perfect, unadulterated Word of God. By this I live. By this I stand. If I had 10,000 lives, I'd like to give every bit of it for this Word. For it's the Word of Jesus Christ. And I don't care how much they can try to disprove it, how much science tries to say it isn't trustworthy and so forth. To me, it's the only thing in the world I can trust. Amen. This Word. He is mine. I love Him. Don't you?
When the family had to make the decision regarding a burial site for Dad, a plot in Eastern Cemetery was chosen, primarily because it is just one block from the tabernacle. The headstone was designed by Mom and Brother Borders, and it is inscribed with verses from the Scriptures and subjects relating to William Branham's teachings and the placing of his ministry.
Mother was laid to rest beside Daddy in May of 1981. We'd like to thank you for joining us today for a brief look at a few of the places the hundreds of thousands of believers from around the world have become familiar with as they listen to the voice of God's prophet, William Branham.